And here we are at the final segment of the active shooter presentation from Ed Monk. This is part 5. This is where we sum everything up. And again, it was great for me to be able to have the Q&A that I had with Ed and back and forth that we were able to do on the challenges that he's had about putting this information out and where he gets resistance. So again, after watching this, you now are going to be armed with probably the best information on what to do and what really counts when it comes to an active shooter situation. You now know that. So now share this information. That's the most important thing I can say. But let's get right back into it and finish up with Ed Monk. What is your I mean, I love that you're doing this and you're out there. What is your view on the ability to what do you think it's going to take? Do you think the numbers were enough for what you showed as far as, what we've already dealt with these shootings?
Yeah.
Um, what's your current feeling on where we're at? Do you think we're making some inroads into this? Do you think do you think the public is demanding these organizations to do something more effective, or is there just this real reticence for anybody to arm teachers or arm staff or have armed staff members full time that are there and trained for this? Because as you said, it's compelling what you said. Armed citizens have a better record of being effective, of not shooting the wrong people in there, to date, and yet that doesn't it's almost falling on deaf ears.
It kind of depends. I think it's all been frustratingly slow for me, but the churches, in my limited experience with who I've dealt with, churches have made inroads, but churches didn't have quite as much legal barriers in the way. I know, I lived in Louisville for 3 years. I know they changed the law in Kentucky to allow concealed carry in churches. They've changed it in Arkansas. I think they changed it in Texas. So, and then because of Sutherland Springs and then West Freeway, I have seen a huge growth in churches finally realizing no one's going to help us for the first 5 to 10 minutes. So schools, on the other hand, in most places, there's just legal barriers that are either impossible or too much frustration. One of my frustrations here in my state, we're allowed to have armed school staff if they go through this process, this paperwork bureaucracy training program. And I actually train 2 of the school districts here in Arkansas every summer. They're armed staff. We train them. My frustration is they're not doing it in the numbers and the right people. In both schools that I train, the people that are armed, that are the certified school safety officers, I think is what they're called, they're all administrative people. Right. They're the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the guy in charge of the buses, the guy in charge of the cafeterias. They are not in the cafeteria and in the front office of the buildings when the shooting happens. So I'm all for armed school staff, but you got to do it to where strategically you have armed staff spread out geographically, so that no matter where it starts, but especially in those places it starts the most often, one of your staff members that's armed can hear it or see it. So generally I recommend 2 armed school staff members in each wing of each building, of each floor. So if you're a science teacher and I'm a calculus teacher here on the 2nd floor east wing, if you have a sick day or you're on a field trip, I'm still here. And one of us will hear this when it starts. You have to have armed people in the cafeteria anytime there's kids there. And a lot of schools, like the one here in my district, the high school, if your student shows up before first bell, you get your butt down the cafeteria, because we're not going to let you wander around school and cause a problem. So they herd all the kids in the cafeteria before first bell, and you can't lock down the cafeteria. There's no protection in there. So many school shootings start before school in the cafeteria. Yeah. Got to have protection there. You got to have protection in the front office.
Well, I thought it was really an interesting point, because I've heard, we're going to harden the schools and everything, harden up make them harder targets. But you made a very good point of that makes a lot of sense for elementary type schools. And, it makes very little sense to do it in colleges and high schools, because of course the shooters are the students, for the most part. They go to the school, and that would only make it worse for them to do that. It was interesting. My son's situation, he was a high school when they were doing it. They were finding that it made more sense. They actually realized that there were some little known, and luckily it wasn't a big deal, but they saw some choke points that they weren't aware of. And they actually opened up the school campus a little bit more. So these choke points wouldn't exist if the kids never, needed to egress. But again, it was a private school, and they were able to move a lot more effectively. And they had, children that were at risk. What's interesting is the schools that I've been to, and they tend to be private. They tend to be, they tend to have people who, have political or celebrity kids going. It's amazing how much differently they look at this. They look at it far more strategically. And I've been very impressed with some of the schools and what they've done. Now they have to, because of, there's a higher risk for kidnapping. There's a higher risk for incidents because of the kids that go to school there. But what's interesting is that that's used as, oh, well, it's because, these kids are privileged kids and they have, they have needs. So therefore, yeah, they're there. But normal kids don't need that type of a look, because it's not going to happen. It just, to me, it's just really sad that something as straightforward as your presentation is, that you just look at the math, that it gets convoluted with people's emotions, people's political persuasions. And the last thing that seems to be considered is the fact that anything that delays the time, if you do something because you feel better about it, and I'm going to let the professionals do this, you have just given that shooter, the ability to just pile up a body count, that's there. And I want to be very clear with people. I know sometimes people will look at the numbers. Ed is, when you saw those numbers, that didn't mean everybody was dead, but they were shot. Those were people that were shot, that are injured. And listen, that's horrific as well. Just in Austin, what I was saying a couple of nights ago, when I was there, 13 people were shot. Nobody's killed. But that's 13 people that were shot. And I don't believe they found the shooter yet. I knew as of 2 days after they hadn't. I have not checked. But, I guess because, me being in Vegas and seeing, what happened here with our mass shooting, I couldn't tell you would never have picked a country concert. You would never have thought, everything, it was such a anomaly, that was there. And when you realize there was no cover, it was a wide open place. The egress was really tough. There was only a couple of unlocked areas where people could get out, and you really saw what happened and the pandemonium that happened after, because the initial response, when they let everybody out, you had people covered in blood, running down the streets, running back to their hotels. That staff sees people running in covered in blood, thinking there's a shooter in that hotel. So the response time was even more delayed with the concentrated of forces that they needed, because they were thinking it was a Mumbai style type of situation where multiple hotels were getting hit. So they couldn't even concentrate all their forces on something like that, and that's with a group that, I will say, not just because my wife's on it, but I've seen the training. They train for this type of stuff all the time. Vegas, they have to, with the hotels and the tourists and everything, they have to have a very good plan. And even though they did, again, there's all these unintended consequences when you don't have people there that can respond right away and see what's going on. And that was, different. Yes, it was more of a, like the tower shooting, the Austin, tower shooting that you're talking about. It's a different animal, but what's interesting is what delayed the response to get up there, and the confusion and everything. And what you're presenting is a much easier problem to solve, especially when it's horrible that it's at a school, but it's not the same challenge of something, having to go up to figure out what you're dealing with, some multi-level, hotel that's above there. Your methods for schools and for churches, it's a pretty simple process that can have dramatic results, for very little really little output on there. It's really, having a couple of really well-armed citizens that understand what to look for and are a deterrent. And also, as you said, they pick gun-free zones. And if they start to know that, hey, you have armed response ready, you have responsibly armed citizens there, the goal would be, hey, just, move on somewhere else. You're not going to do it here.
Yeah, well, we now know because the federal government prosecuted the wife of the Pulse nightclub shooter. She was acquitted, but she was prosecuted. And so we learned there that what initially came out was he was Muslim. Of course, Muslims hate gays. He targeted a gay nightclub. And
right.
We now know that's not what happened. He targeted Disney World.
Yeah.
That was his first choice, but he went there and there are cops everywhere. Right. So he did the math in his head and said, this ain't gonna last long. So we now know he Googled nightclubs in Orlando. He caught an audible at the line of scrimmage, nightclubs in Orlando. I don't remember the name of the first club that came up, but we know he went there because a security camera shows him drive in to do a recon, and that club paid an off-duty cop to be there for security. He drove a marked car that was parked right out front. So I'm not saying, I don't know for a fact that's why he didn't do it, but he drove on and he went to the second one that came up on his Google, which was Pulse. So Pulse was not his initial plan. Pulse was plan C, audible called at the line of scrimmage. And when he drove up to Pulse, they had an armed off-duty cop, but that cop's day job was drug interdiction on the interstate, so they gave him an unmarked car. So when the shooter drove through the parking lot, he didn't see a police car, and the cop happened to be down the block writing a freaking ticket when the shooting actually started. So we know deterrence works. Aurora, Colorado, the Batman Theater, he considered doing an airport, but he said there's always a lot of security at the airport, so he chose to do a movie theater because it was isolated and he didn't think there'd be security there. So we know for a fact, Isla Vista, the guy in Santa Barbara, he was going to do a festival, a yearly festival. And he wrote in his manifesto that, as I reviewed videos on YouTube of that festival, there were far too many cops there. So I couldn't get the numbers that I wanted. It's very clear what they want to do.
Hey, everybody. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, please take the time to go to surviveviolence.com, give us your email, allow us to send you and give you a free masterclass on how to deal with the subjects that we talk about on this channel. Also, please join the channel, hit the subscribe button, notification button, and please share this with all your friends. Yeah, what's unfortunate is I think we've gotten away from, like I look at the numbers now, very, like less than 3% of the country when I was in, and now it's down to less than 1% of the country has any sort of military experience coming in there. And so, being around in a trained area, at least understanding, response and to violence, only a small portion of our country, is trained as first responders or military personnel or trained in any way, shape, or form. And it seems like we are very comfortable outsourcing all of that. The idea of you being your own first responder and having some basic training is really foreign to most people. And listen, I'm not advocating that we all have to become a militarized state or do anything that, on the level of Israel, but waiting, like at my house and everything, not just because of, granted, my wife is a police officer. I'm trained, but I was always trained as a little kid that, you are responsible for yourself because it's going to take a while for anybody to come help you. So you're going to need to be, you're going to need to understand the basics. And I think, presentations like this, and I truly appreciate you doing this for us. I hope it's going to really make people think, and I hope those numbers are going to really, hit home, and that math is going to hit home, and that you're going to look at your own. Listen, we can't control what organizations do, but we sure as heck can control what we do. And that, if that math that you shared does not jar people, to the realities of what's going on, when you're dealing in a situation like that, and, I have no hope for you. So I hope that this, I hope to really share this in probably different avenues than you normally do this. And I can get this to other influencers and people like this to get this out, because you have a very compelling case. It's very well done. It is not it is agnostic. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with, emotions or feeling good or anything like that, or trying to do anything other than educate people to the realities of an active shooter. And here's the cold, hard realities. What are we going to do about it? And I hope that, as discouraging as some responses might be that you get from some of these organizations, that you continue this message, because it's really needed. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this with us. Do you have anything for people? And just, is there any way they can help? Is there any way they can they can help share the message? Obviously, they can reach out to you. I'm sure some people from the audience are going to want to have you do a more in-depth presentation for them and have you come out or do something. There's a lot of influencers that we have on here that have organizations. But for the people listening, what would be helpful for the message? And also, what can they do? Is there anything else they should be aware of? Any other organizations or services that you'd like to make them aware of?
Well, I mean, the one thing they can do is share this presentations, share the link with other people and say, take a look at this. When I did the one for the law school, I was disappointed that we didn't do it in person, but because of COVID, the only thing they could do was Zoom. Right. But I was shocked at how wide. I got contacted from DC, California. I got all over. So it actually got a much broader play. If you think other people are interested and they want to look at the data of what'll help this, just share it with them.
Great.
Just again, if you get intelligent people in a room, let's say a school, and you say, I live in Arkansas. That's where I'm talking to you from. Right. We have a tornado problem. Okay. Let's talk. What are we going to do about tornadoes? The people in that room will have a logical discussion. They might disagree or prioritize certain things over another, but they'll have a logical discussion. Same if you're on the coast about hurricane problems. You throw the gun in when the active shooter, and they just lose the ability to reason. And again, they'll say, yeah, you're a gun guy, you're pushing guns. Well, we've got a COVID problem in this country, and I've never advocated guns as a solution for COVID.
Right.
We have a driving and a texting driving problem in this country. I've never advocated guns because there's no data or history that shows that that'll help it. But clearly here it will. And actually people know the solution is a good person with a gun, because while they will say, no, the school staff, the church staff, that we cannot have them here with a gun, when the shooter shows up, as soon as they can get on a phone, they're screaming at the operator to please send a cop with a gun there. So they know the solution is somebody there with a gun. The question is, do you want that solution there 30 seconds after the first shot or 7 or 8 minutes after the first shot? I want it there in the first 30 seconds. Do you want 7, 6, 7, 8 people shot, or do you want 27, 28 people shot? It's so simple to me.
Well, see, and that's the other thing that you really made clear. Zero is not an option. We hope to God there's no deaths. We could probably hope for that. We hope maybe he's not he didn't shoot, the person that got shot doesn't die. We all hope for that. But to sit there and go for zero, you can't. And that's what I think people fear. They're going to have to make the hard decisions. And the hard decision is, the longer you wait, the higher the count. It's just math. Yep. So, and the other thing I want to make clear before we close out here is, I want to make sure everybody understands, I limited Ed to this presentation. I thought it was a great starting point. He can go far more in depth. There's a lot more he can share. If you're looking for, a more in-depth presentation, Ed definitely can do that. And the other thing is, I'm sure, Ed, I'm going to get some questions maybe for some specifics, and maybe we could do a follow-up to answer some of those specifics if you're open to that. Sure.
And I can focus it towards, when I talk to law enforcement agencies, it is geared toward law enforcement agencies. Right. And lessons learned for cops and what cops can do with training and tactics. When I talk to churches, it's geared toward churches. When I talk to schools, it's geared towards schools. But I also have a section of just how individuals, for those of us who choose to go armed, yep. Right? What can we do to increase our ability to do it? And when I talk to schools, okay, by law or by choice, they're not going to have armed staff. I got there. But there's still other things we can do to limit, fight, flee, barricade. How are you going to fight? We teach, if you can get past the violence thing, we can teach them how to fight identify things in their room that are potential field expedient weapons that they can use, very easy, cheap options of how they can barricade and keep the stuff out. I love when I talk to teachers, when we talk about attacking them, when they reload or have a malfunction. It's great. That's a window of opportunity. And because most of these guys aren't well trained, it takes them a while to do that. And so with malfunctions, even teachers that don't have any gun experience, every teacher has the frustration of dealing with a stapler that's all jammed up, and you got to peel the thing open and pry the staples out. And when I use that analogy and talk to the teachers about that's what's happening in that gun, he has to rip it apart, take everything out, and reload it, and that's going to take some time. And I can see the teachers, the lights go on in their head. We can do that.
Yeah, see, that's the fantastic part. If you can put it in language that people can relate to and understand, then all of a sudden they don't have the excuse of, oh, well, this is firearms, this is esoteric, this is anything. You make it very real. The staplers in there. Everybody's had some sort of mechanical malfunction of some piece of equipment of theirs in life, and when they understand that this is a tool that operates a certain way, and that when there's an opportunity gets provided, when that tool isn't operating correctly, and there's I mean, that's one thing we teach. We drill on reloads, we drill on malfunctions all the time to an active shooter type response when we're doing our training. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. I think this would be a good place for us to end, because you've been more than generous with your time. The contact information, obviously people will have that. I will let you know when everything's up there, and I just can't thank you enough for your time and putting this out to people. It's a message that needs to be heard, and it's a painful message for people, but it's a very necessary message. And thanks for putting in the way. I've seen a lot of active shooter information. I've never seen anything with the immediate clarity that you put out right away. That's what's so nice about it. Is it's not rooted in any sort of an agenda or anything. It's just, here are the facts. Here's the one thing, people respond these ways, but this is the only thing that really makes sense. This is if you understand this math, you understand everything. And now you have the information. How are you going to go forward? And I think that even if the organization doesn't do anything, you've put them on notice, basically.
Exactly.
And I appreciate that. And I wish you all the best, and I wish you great success with this.
Thanks so much, Tim. Enjoyed it.
Okay, that wraps up the complete series for this piece of content. I hope you really enjoyed it. And listen, don't forget, go to surviveviolence.com, give us your email address, get your free masterclass, send your friends there. Also, share this channel with people. I hope you subscribe. Please subscribe, hit the notification bells. But more importantly, if there's a piece of content that really resonated with you, get it out to your friends. That's how this channel will grow. And I can't thank you enough for all the help so far. But we'll be coming up with some new content very soon. And thank you for this series.